Coming up on This Week in Computer Hardware, Google's smart contact lens, AMD ships HSA, first spam from a fridge, new ASUS GPUs, the worst tech trend of 2013, and is it the right time to buy an SSD? It's all coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 250, recorded January 16th, 2014. Eyeball computers, not curved screens. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Ting.com. Ting is a mobile phone service that makes sense. Save money with Ting, pay only for what you use. Ting doesn't require a contract and offers unlimited devices on one shared plan. To save $25 on your first Ting device, visit twitch.ting.com. That's twitch.ting.com. Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, the Twit Weekly show that aims to bring you the best, most useful, most informative, and most fun news about computer hardware, technology, and of course, we love the mobile devices like the tablets and occasionally even the phones. I'm Patrick Norton. Ryan Shrout is on assignment in San Diego, California, and unavailable to do the podcast. And I apologize, but my tentative co-host is trapped in traffic somewhere east of me. So it's going to be me solo, but it's a good show. It's exciting stuff. Wearable tech, one of the big themes. Everybody's like, wearable tech is going to be a big thing at the Consumer Electronics Show this year. And as I've come to expect, Google comes out of nowhere with something weird, frightening, and utterly kind of cool and useful. They just introduced today their smart contact lens project. Now, the woman that helps take care of my children occasionally, assists my wife, she's a student at Berkeley, has had diabetes. She was a kid, and this is fascinating. What you're looking at there is a contact lens they're trying to develop that will actually analyze the glucose levels in human tears. I don't think it will induce tears. I don't think it's a crying machine, but literally the idea that the contact lens sits on top of your eyeball, or I should say the layer of liquid on top of your eyeball, and with a tiny amount of electronics will actually analyze what's going on in there. So I'm going to quote this. We're now testing a smart contact lens. It's built to measure glucose levels in tears using a tiny wireless chip and miniaturized glucose sensor that are embedded between two layers of soft contact lens material, generate a reading once per second, and even possibly put LEDs in the contact lens to serve as an early warning to the person wearing the lens should things start to go south. And if you've ever seen things go south for someone with diabetes, the idea of them having a flashing light in their eyeball telling them that it's time to either grab a pack of sugar to run for the insulin is a really cool concept. I thought this was kind of fascinating. They're working, I guess, in early discussions with the FDA to see whether or not they can make this happen. But I think this is a really cool development of technology and much cooler than, say, another Fitbit clone or Fitbit wannabe. Call me callous, but I just think that's really cool. That's up at Google's blog, and that's the Smart Contact Lens Project. In related news, the Internet of Things was another big deal this year. LG was talking about texting to your appliances at home, what they call the home chat, right? Rather than have an actual Android or iOS application, that you would literally send a text to the number that's registered to your refrigerator or your washing machine, or your washing machine would text you to tell you that the rinse cycle is over, it's time to fold, or time to move things to the dryer, I guess. And this is crazy. One of the things Bruce Schneier has been pretty adamant about how poorly supported the software related to embedded processors are. Usually it's old, it's poorly updated, it's not updated after it's finished by the factory, if it is even properly finished, if it isn't just slapped together demo code from the chip manufacturer. So I thought this was crazy. It was up at quartz.com. Quote, between December 23rd and January 6th, more than 100,000 internet-connected smart things, including media players, smart televisions, and at least one refrigerator, were part of a network of computers used to send 750,000 spam emails. So this was discovered by Proofpoint, a enterprise security company. And when you get right down to it, 750,000 spam emails is not much in the larger world of spam. In fact, it's probably like 15 seconds from an average big dollar spam operation, if it's not 15 milliseconds. But what was really crazy about this is we've known about botnets or zombie nets, groups of computers that have been basically rooted or exploited or Trojan horsed and are part of a larger collection of machines that could be manipulated by nefarious individuals to do scary things, or, for example, by Stanford to do folding at home, kind of two, one's voluntary and one's designed for good. The other one's designed to, say, help you crack into databases of computer code or credit card numbers or something. But this was interesting because this is the first time that people have taken things we don't think about, media servers, set-top boxes, small devices around the house, appliances that connect to the internet, and use them to do naughty things like send spam. And spam's pretty innocuous. But the idea is that there's essentially no upgrades for these devices. Or all too often they're poorly supported, and the security is never very well implemented. So holes that have been plugged in OS 10 or Linux or BSD, or of course the almighty target of all attacks, Windows, is incredibly available to be assaulted. So really interesting article. But the idea of botnets being part of the Internet of Things, as the Internet of Things explodes, for example, Intel wants everything in your body to have its own Intel microprocessor and connection to the web. So imagine if they could all be exploited. It's, the mind kind of boggles, or at least it kind of terrifies me. Ryan Stroud will talk about this a little bit more next week. AMD A8 7600 Kaveri, the APU is out. This is the first HSA processor, the heterogeneous system architecture. It's a pretty big deal for AMD. It's a new core, it's a new memory hierarchy, it's a new process technique for AMD. HSA is the idea that we want power, performance, programmability, and portability. And it's essentially the idea that you want to be able to access all of different computing devices contained on a single chip in the least painful way possible, in terms of to program it, to port the code to other areas, and without losing performance. It's a pretty good benchmarks up there. The new part looks fast. It still gets spanked, I think, by the Intel cores. However, the AMD graphics performance on the APUs is kicking Intel's ass in no uncertain ways. The power consumption is a little higher on the AMD part still. But it's really, really, really interesting. One, it's a very successful release for AMD. It's going to be interesting to see what's going on with the evolution of code and addressing the processor. Definitely a good place for AMD to be in terms of graphics. But we're kind of curious to see what's going on, whether or not heterogeneous computing moves forward the way we'd like to see it in terms of making things easier to code and faster to code. Quote, the implications of this launch will resonate for years to come, but as with the case with 64-bit computing, I worry that it will take Intel jumping in to really move the industry forward. That's Ryan's quote from kind of the conclusion of the article. AMD and its team are hard at work getting software developers on board and working on software that can take advantage of the heterogeneous architectures they have built, but the work is slow and tedious. So it's cool, right? So they can show that heterogeneous computing, sped up things with a LibreOffice test or decoding JPEG files in Windows. But it'll be interesting to see where this goes and if HSA takes hold. It's a very large open platform that people are trying to move architecture forward on. Speaking of AMD, they've officially launched the R5, R7, R9, and M200 mobile GPU series. So essentially, there's one GPU in each of the R series or RM200 series. Tim Berry says up at PCPer, quote, do not get too excited. However, all the new mobile GPUs are based on the desktop versions of the Volcanic Islands and not AMD's new Hawaii GPUs. So essentially, they're the Radeon HD 8000M series, which was OEM rebrands of the HD 7000 series, which is based on AMD Graphics Core Next 1.0 architecture and Pitcairn. And so, they've got at least they've got support for like DirectX 11.2. They can support up to 4 gigs of GDDR5 memory and at least 320 shader cores. There's not a whole lot of really, really dense information, but Tim found that Computerbase put together specs for a couple of the parts, the M230 and the R9 M290X. Now, it's kind of funny, right? The R9 M290X sounds really amazing, but it's essentially an HD 8970M. So You're looking at, like, for the R9 M290X, 1280 shaders clocked at 850 megahertz, 80 texture units, 32 ROPs, and they can match that up with 4 gigs of memory. The R5 M230 is a significantly slower part with 320 shaders clocked at 855 megahertz, and again, 20 texture units. Excuse me, 20 texture units and 4 ROPs. Alienware, Clevo, Lenovo, and MSI are going to be picking these up, and I'll be really curious to see what the R9 looks like in a mobile application. So this is good. At least if you like mobile gaming performance. So, pardon me. In the continuing battle to release all of the 270X and 280Xs to Bitcoin miners and other miners, ASUS just dropped the 270X and 280X direct CU2 GPUs, pardon me. 270, 280X, awesome cards. Direct CU, which is essentially ASUS's big old fat chunk of copper on a GPU line, are looking really good. You can read the full benchmarks up at pcper.com. The coolers, pretty awesome, and the power is actually pretty interesting. You know, I'm going to quote Josh right here when he said, quote, ASUS aims to provide users with a better overall experience through design decisions which improve performance without being significantly more expensive than the reference designs. So these are basically $20 more than the stock designs that came from AMD, but they're basically engineered to produce better overclocking and significantly cooler temperatures, which is kind of a big deal on the 270 and the 280 and the 290. Josh's benchmarks basically said the cards are pretty well matched in terms of performance, and that the DC2 coolers do, quote, a mighty fine job. If you can take a look at the load temperatures on the last page, where did they go? You're looking at a few degrees cooler than some of the other ones there. Overclocking, he said, didn't go quite as well as he had expected. But overall, he said they were a pretty solid card. The biggest problem, of course, being with the 270 and 290s right now is actually finding them for sale and finding them for sale at an actual MSRP, much less street price, since demand for high-end GPUs has been spiked by Bitcoin miners or other currency miners, and they're still fairly difficult to find, unless, of course, you happen to be on the right website on the right day, in which case you're golden. Yeah, you know, it's been actually kind of frustrating. Unless you want a lower end card, availability on the cards could be a pretty big problem. So we should take a moment, or I should take a moment, to thank our sponsors over at Ting. I am a Ting user. Ting, if you haven't heard about it, is a different way to get your cell phone service. No contracts, no end termination fees. It's month to month. You don't pay money up front to get your phone. Well, actually, you do pay money up front to get your phone, but it's a little different. The idea is that they're not going to lock you into a 2-year contract. They're also not going to subsidize your phone, because you may feel like you're getting a free phone with the carrier you're on now, but chances are they make a couple $1,000s off of you over the course of them giving you a $500 or $600 discount on that phone. It's pretty clever. But Ting actually really wants you to have a choice, and they want to make the choice as simple as possible. You buy your hardware, or you port your hardware over. They're a Sprint reseller, essentially. So any phone that works with Sprint is going to work with Ting. No weird pricing systems, no irritating bundles for your voice minutes, your text messages, your megabytes of data. They're all built separately, and it's really, really simple. If you use all of the data, you pay more money. If you use no data, you pay less money. And it's really, really simple. If I go over that, it just bumps me up to the next size bit bucket and charges me that flat rate. And if I go over that, it bumps me up to the next one. No punitive charges, no scary bills at the end of the month. It's really, really nice. It's really, really thoughtful, actually. Everything's included: voicemail, caller ID, tethering, hotspot, 3-way calling. You're not going to get nailed next to $30 because you want to tether off of your phone. I really, really like that. The bills are clear. You have a single plan. You can add as many devices to it as you want. You just basically get charged $6 a month for a device. If you have 4 phones, you know, it's 4 times 6, $24. It's really, really simple. I love the fact that their online service is great. Their control panel is incredibly useful. I've had to deal with customer service because of a phone I was porting over that didn't quite behave. And not only did I basically immediately get a phone answer, I got a follow-up email, I got resources, we got it fixed, which was awesome. I've never actually said nice things about a tech support on a phone, or at least not too often. It's really simple. You buy your phone from Ting, or you move your device to Ting. They have a whole list of phones that you can bring over, or data. If you want to bring over like a MiFi style modem or something, you activate your device. You can select a new phone number. You can port your old phone number over. They break out your rates, and they bill you at the end of the month for what you've used. I really suggest, if you want to, really reduce your cell phone bill, take a good look at Ting. And if you do that, go to twitch.ting.com. Save some money, manage your phones. The amount of money my wife and I can save off this is amazing. The service has been fantastic. I'm actually really excited about using them because it just works and it's inexpensive. Hundreds of dollars, well, $100 something less per month, which adds up to hundreds of dollars over the course of a year. That's a big deal, people. Check out their savings calculator. See how much you or your company can save. And by the way, if you sign up using that twitch.ting.com website, you can save $25 on your first Ting device when you sign up. And it's a really good deal, people. I suggest you check it out at twitch.ting.com. Start saving today. And I want to remind you to check out twitch.ting.com and thank them for supporting This Week in Computer Hardware. Really good read up at PC Per that Ryan Trout put up, I think somewhere near the tail end of CES. It all kind of bleeds together. Quote, one of the most frequent questions we get at PC Perspective is some derivative, is now the time to buy or should I wait? You've heard us talk about that. Save your pennies. Don't buy it now and then buy another part in 6 months and another part 6 months after that. Save up your money first, build your whole PC. But a lot of people are asking, like, is it okay? Is it okay to buy an SSD now? Can I finally buy an SSD? And it's a pretty funny chart, because what you're looking at is some of the price drops on a Samsung 840 EVO 1 terabyte SSD, which is a great big expensive SSD, especially when you realize, for under $100 you can get a really nice 1 terabyte hard drive. But those lines you see up there, is the yellow line is Amazon, the red line is, the red line is Amazon, the yellow line is Newegg, and this graph, which is put together by Hoverhound, is basically showing you different price drops from $600, which is kind of the standard original offering price, and then down as low as, I think, $525. That's a huge price jump right there. And it's a really nice drive, and it's basically sitting right down like $530 right now, 53 cents per gigabyte, no rebates. That's the actual sale price. You go to the 500 gigabyte model, you're looking at like $300 for that drive, or about 61 cents a gigabyte. That is a really affordable deal. Intel drives, 240 gigabyte Intel drives are selling for between $170 and $200. It's an interesting article that does a really close analysis of what the cards have cost, how the prices have fluctuated historically, and it's funny. If you've been thinking about buying an SSD, what's really nice about this article is Ryan's just looking at SSDs that are not only fast, but that he and Alan feels are particularly reliable. So it's pretty good, because performance, I wouldn't worry a whole lot about performance on SSDs, because they're all so much faster than any rotating media hard drive, and the performance is so difficult to actually detect without anything other than a benchmark. It's really, really a good read if you've been thinking about buying an SSD. And I'm going to sum up, Ryan says, as far as you know, no SSD launch is coming anytime in the near future that are going to kind of change the pricing structures. PCI Express and stuff are basically going to be consistent, although the SATA interface isn't changing. Quote, so are we 100% sure this is the best time in recent memory to buy a new solid state drive? Ryan says, I can't claim that, but I think the entire team is about as confident as we can be that the buyers of these units will not be regretting their decision anytime soon. So, yeah, if you've been thinking about buying an SSD, it's time, especially when you realize 240 gig SSDs like Crucial M500, which is a nice drive. It's selling for $150 on Amazon. And if you just want to put your operating system in a couple apps, 128 gigabyte drives are sitting around $100. These are really good deals, especially compared to where they were a couple years ago. Zalman, it's been a long time since I've installed a Zalman cooler, but Zalman's come out with liquid cooling systems recently. So I want to say earlier this year they came out, according to the folks over at Frosty Tech, and Frosty Tech's been testing the LQ315, quote, the middle child of Zalman's liquid cooling systems. Very, very similar to the other self-contained liquid cooling systems we've seen over the last couple of years. Essentially, there's a fan attached to a radiator, attached to tubing, which is already pre-filled, and attached to the heat sink that goes on your processor. You know, aluminum radiator, copper-based water block. Fan runs at 2,000, 9,000 RPM. Standard 120 millimeter biscuit fan, big healthy fan. Whole thing together weighs about 700 grams, they say, and it's filled with, well, basically distilled water and antifreeze. Decent pub head construction, not my favorite water block construction there, but it seems to be doing the job. Really nice teardown pictures. If you ever want to see what was inside of a liquid cooling system, I got to say the Frosty Tech people did a really, really nice job of tearing this thing open and giving you a look inside. But they also do a really good job. If you look at the last page of the website, they basically take a look at the whole collection of thermal heat sinks. They have test results. Intel Core i7 Extreme Edition, tested at a 200-watt heat load, which is a pretty healthy chunk. And you can actually see how this compares not only in terms of the degrees centigrade it cooled the processor to, but the amount of noise the fan generated on that. So this actually wasn't the quietest. Scythe's Mugen 4, I think, was at like 41.9 decibels. No, I take that back. Zalman's LQ315 at low setting was one of the quietest at 36 decibels, but it was also one of the warmest at 34 degrees centigrade. But not the highest performance device out there, but also not the most expensive nor the loudest. Really good read, and I highly recommend if you've been curious about exploring what water blocks kind of look like and how the systems work. A really good teardown of that Zalman LQ315 up at Frosty Tech. Strange thing. I'm really not sure how to react to it. NZXT has an interesting new case. It's pretty if you like windows and red accents. It's the NZXT H440. Quote, a water cooling friendly case without optical drive bays. If you're wondering what that means, as you see the next picture scroll up, you'll see a whole lot of fans in the front and back of that case. And yes, kids, not a single optical drive bay to be found. White with black accents or black with red accents. It's a good sized case, 9 by 20 by 19. No 5¼ inch bays. Can you tell I'm obsessed with that? Space for 8 3.5 inch or 2.5 inch drives. You can fit aftermarket coolers up to 180 millimeters. Of course, there's a big old side window, a nice separated area for your PSU to keep the heat from it away from other things. I got to say, I like the side loading drive bays on that for the 3.5 inch and 2.5 inch drives. $119.99. Tim Berry writes up at PC Per, and will be available soon. So 2-year warranty on the case, which is kind of nice to see. Something I wish I'd gotten to see at CES and didn't get a chance to, and hopefully Ryan didn't talk about this too much last week. Oculus Rift's Crystal Cove prototype. There's a damage report article, blog by Scott Wasson. And he, I think it was Scott wrote that one up. Yeah, Scott Wasson wrote that one up. And talks about, basically gets pretty in depth on the Oculus Rift update. Obviously, the original version of it caused Ryan and several people I know extreme, or at least a fair amount of stomach discomfort. The Crystal Cove prototype that was at CES 2014 was really exciting people. I know a couple friends of mine that got hands-on with it. 1080p LCD inside of that, and a considerable reduction in sort of the lag time going on that, because the idea is like, well, you know, VR headsets, like happened with Ryan, is a lot of people get vertigo, they get nausea. Scott for Rev 3 Games damn near puked within a minute or two of putting the Oculus VR on. Some people are pretty unhappy with that. So they did some interesting stuff to kind of speed up the feedback loop between the sensors and display. A 1080p AMOLED display, which basically has better colors, which is a little easier on your eyes. And the pixel switching time on the AMOLED displays are ridiculously fast, like less than a millisecond. So the Rift prototypes, the early prototypes, you're looking at like 15 millisecond refresh rates, and now this brings it under a millisecond. That's a huge reduction. That said, there's a lot of other things going on inside of there. It's a pretty big deal to implement the low persistence display mode so that it can actually doesn't create the ghosting effects that kind of upsend people. And the latency actually was a pretty big improvement for a lot of folks out there. The head tracking is supposed to be significantly improved so that, when you turn your head, everything keeps up to speed. I'm kind of excited to see this because one, the graphics on the original one weren't very impressive. And two, the fact that it made so many people just experience vertigo or just lose their stomachs really fast was kind of frightening. So I'm excited about the Crystal Cove and what's going forward with Oculus, because a lot of serious gamers I know are absolutely in love with the idea of this thing bringing them full-on gaming performance. So one thing I will mention that we're not going to discuss today, because I think this is Ryan's kind of thing. Scott Michaud wrote this up for PCPro.com. But at the second annual PC Perspectives Best Hardware of 2013, they got in depth on this at PC Per on episode 282 on their podcast that they recorded on January 2nd. But best GPU of 2013, oddly enough, the GTX 780. That's the only one I'll reveal. Best CPU, best storage, best case, best motherboard, best price drop, best mobile device of 2013, best trend and worst trend. And each of the winners get an Editor's Choice Award. You can scoot on over to PCPer.com to get your grubby little mitts on that and see what they picked as the best stuff out there. But I'm going to make you go to the website directly for that one. Don't scan any farther. Oh my goodness. 2 reveals. Well, the other 7 or 8 you can go to PCPer.com for. And I'm sure Ryan will get a little bit deeper into that next week. Chat room. Ladies and gentlemen, do we have any more Web 6169 with a classy response to the NZXT case? That case blows, which would make sense given the number of fans inside of it, or perhaps he or she was making commentary on the quality of the design. Replicant X3R0, does that thing sound like 8 jumbo jets? Actually, it shouldn't, because 120 millimeter fans have actually gotten pretty quiet these days if they're well designed. And of course, you can turn down, you can throttle down the amount of power going into them, which actually causes them to spin slower and not be so horrendously loud. Alpha Omega says optical head tracking should be better. I agree. It's one of the reasons why Carmack joined Oculus Rift, to help make optical tracking better. And funny. And Taylor Karras says, I don't think we need optical cases anymore, which is the statement of this case. It's funny, Taylor. I saw a bunch of new cases at CES, and almost every single one had an optical drive inside of it. I think either because people still have Blu-rays or DVDs or gaming content that's on discs. It's kind of funny. I've got 2 computers, 2 laptops in front of me. Neither one of them has an optical disc, but in the desktop world, especially for entertainment, home theaters, and gaming, it seems to kind of still be de rigueur. Patrick says, Scott Michaud, reveal worst trend, laugh out loud. Oh man, Scott, you really want me to? I think I can get some help from the campers at the Twit Cottage. I'm a little afraid as I scroll down. Best hardware. Where did it go? Best trend, best mobile device, worst trend. Are you sure, Scott? Actually, if is it Josh on the board? Can you pull up the very bottom of the PC best hardware? Hold on a second. This is actually my new favorite.
Best trend. Oh, worst trend. Here it is.
Worst trend, all the way to the bottom. Don't show the best trend of 2013.
Okay.
Just pull up the worst trend.
Let me make sure I'm not going to show the worst or the best. I don't want to do that.
Oh my goodness, ladies and gentlemen, you may wait with bated breath. You may want to find a lavender sachet to.
Oh wait, this is it. I think. Let me.
I'll give you. There it is. The Editor's Choice PC Perspective Pooh Award goes to the GPU shortage from coin miners. Yeah. Let's face it, it's too late to get rich from mining fresh Bitcoins. Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's the way to get rich with GPUs is as a reseller to inflate prices on the poor suckers who think that an R9 290X will explode their bank account. Yeah, if you think you're going to use R90 290Xs and mint Bitcoins, you need to learn a lot about what's going on in the Bitcoin mining world because you aren't even close to being in that game. Oh my goodness. So, yeah. One last one from the chat room. Leo likes to say optical media is dead, but most of us don't agree. And I got to say, I'm a big fan of Blu-rays, mostly because I like 15 to 30 megabit minimally compressed streams of gorgeous video. And I got to say, some people I didn't expect to see the difference in my family have seen the difference in stuff like Downton Abbey and some of their favorite movies, Iron Man 3 and some others, looking at the stream coming off of Amazon or Netflix and comparing that to the Blu-ray. It's actually kind of surprising. Colors seem to be more saturated, richer. Obviously, there's no artifacts. I'm finding it more and more frustrating. A lot of video services streaming online are giving you a couple of minutes of crufty, highly compressed video before the stream settles it out. Not unlike using Skype on the podcast today. But I think on one hand, optical media has ways to go yet before it goes away in DVD and Blu-rays. I fear, though, that there will never really be a 4K spec for optical media. And best case scenario is that they have a fairly well-secured file on a hard drive. And worst case scenario, we're streaming. I mean, H.265, we've had a lot of questions about that on HT Nation and Texzilla. I'm going to need 40 megabits per second down to stream 4K on Netflix. No, you're going to need what everybody's doing, which is Netflix and Amazon and Vudu and all these other video companies are implementing the new H.265 spec, which is more efficient, squeezes things smaller and more accurately, and has the potential to do a greater bit depth than 8.264. And that'll allow them to use your existing Netflix player, maybe on a PC, a Windows PC or a Macintosh PC. But H.265 for 4K on devices like Roku boxes and Apple TV is going to require a next generation piece of hardware and an upgrade. But for the new generation of 4K televisions and some of the other devices out there, a software upgrade will do it. It'll be interesting, I think, to see. There's not a huge performance penalty on the decoding side of H.265, maybe 10 or 15% we're hearing. But for devices that use a tiny little chip on the board to do the decoding, obviously H.265 is not implemented yet. It's going to be Sony says 4-layer Blu-ray for 4K. We'll see. It would be nice if they could pull that off, but I wait with bated breath because certainly the consumer electronics companies learned a lesson from the Blu-ray HD DVD fights and the lack of available content on 3D, and worked really, really hard with content providers to start providing 4K content for their early adopters. And that was a big thing for me at CES this year. I was looking at LG and Samsung and Sony discussing this, especially LG coming out of the gate with, Netflix and House of Cards being, shot and edited and mastered in 4K, and then Samsung following up with Netflix and Amazon and all these other services that'll be moving to 4K. Fushigi says H.265 is already a thing or down the pipe. H.265 is in the final stages of about an 8-year development cycle. It's not an IEEE spec. I apologize for not knowing who kind of owns it, but essentially they started working on it years and years and years ago, realizing they would need a follow-up, kind of the next step beyond H.264. So we talked to some people that are in sort of the final stages of doing things like, improving performance on assembly for embedded chips and encoding tools. So it is pretty much, not quite here, but certainly by the end of the year and by 2015, I think it'll be pretty common at that point. Darkroom 08 says, I'm thinking 4K Blu-rays next, and that'll be it for optical discs. That's entirely a good possibility. I think it's going to be interesting to see whether or not, we go from 4K to 8K in terms of displays. That'll be really frightening. And Fuberski says, early nomination for worst trend of 2014, curved screens. There's a great article up on Ars Technica that talks about the problem with curved screens. I tweeted it out at Patrick Norton earlier today. It's a fantastic article. The woman who wrote it, I think, majored in physics. So she does math and she explains angles and what's going on. But I agree, the curved screen thing, in most cases, the screens are the perfect radius for sitting 30 or 40 feet from the television, but nobody's actually sitting 30 or 40 feet from a 4K television. If they are, they should have just saved a bunch of money and bought a 1080p or a 720p television. But I think maybe there's one that has the curvature that's appropriate for being 10 to 13 feet, I think from Samsung. But for the most part, buy a flat television. I think the curved TVs are a pretty serious gimmick that's going to be about as long-term successful as CinemaScope for people who are movie fans from the 1950s. Taylor says, I know lots of people think it's cool. I'm like, yeah, it is cool. You have these giant-ass 85, 105-inch televisions, and they're curved, and they're big, and they're giant, and they look awesome. But, you know, who the hell's got that kind of money to drop on a television? Not me. So... oh, my goodness. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all for joining in, especially the folks in the chat room for chipping in with the questions. I'm going to keep an eye on there in case any more questions pop up. We will have a normal Patrick and Ryan Twitch next week, I promise you, unless one of us is hit by a truck, in which case we have probably bigger issues, and I will weep quietly, or Ryan will weep quietly, and then we will move on. But Twitch at twit.tv is the email address. At Ryan Schrout is Ryan's Twitter. I'm at Patrick Norton. And of course, PC Per is an awesome place to go to get all your hardware reviews. They are hardcore and they do some really good testing. You can find me geeking out at Techzilla or HD Nation or our new show, DIY Tryin', which is me and Michael Hand doing anything from building a FreeNAS box to making donuts because we like making things. It makes us happy to border on putting a pun. And I want to thank each and every one of you for watching Twitch and say, we'll see you next week.